think we're live on Facebook now. Yes, we are. Brilliant. Hello, everyone. We are live on Facebook, and it is great to be back for season 3, episode 1 of Cut the Crap. It's fabulous to be back after such a long gap, and with such a wonderful guest. I'm incredibly privileged to have Dr. Aneesh Pradhan with us here today.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you for being here and agreeing to speak with me. We'll just give it a few minutes for people to just keep joining.
Sure.
And for all those who have already joined, we've done season 1 and season 2 of Cut the Crap. We speak about some issues that aren't really spoken about much. We try to cover the stuff that's kind of behind the scenes and get to know people's opinions on this community, or whatever you would like to call it, that involves Indian classical music and dance. And so I'm really excited to speak to Dr. Aneesh Pradhan today about some of those issues. He's a brilliant musician, also an author of many books that he's written on Indian classical music. So we will speak about a few topics regarding that. Thank you for joining. And the first question I want to ask you actually is, how has the lockdown been for you? And for you, you know, we've been on lockdown for now a few months now. What are the concerns that arise in your mind when it comes to Indian classical music, and what are the positives that you've seen coming out of this community?
Well, on a personal front, I'd say that of course we need to keep safety in mind and all the precautions in mind. But having said that, it can be incredibly frustrating many a time, because as musicians and you as a dancer, you know that we're always moving around, doing concerts or meeting people, and not just within our own cities, but across cities, across towns, across countries too. And here we are locked down in our homes. But at the same time, for a musician, making music for the longest time is a solitary journey. I mean, what you do as a performance is a different, but what happens behind the scenes is what you do at your home, where you're not actually performing. Now, of course, people do their riyaz also as performances on Facebook, but that apart, so one is used to that solitary confinement, but that is something that is that you have chosen. Of your own volition, whereas this is something that is kind of imposed on you by circumstances surrounding you. So I can imagine that the rest of the fraternity is also feeling equally frustrated. But I think we need to be positive in these circumstances too, and try to chart a course for the future. I think it at least for the next 6 to 8 months, if not more, we will not be seeing too many live concerts. Although in some small pockets they are doing small recordings with smallish ensembles, but not for a live audience. I think increasingly people will come in for those concerts as well. But I think we need to design concepts keeping this in view.
And what is your, you have started something called Gift the Concert.
Yes.
And this is something that I want you to speak about, because I think it's a wonderful initiative. If you can just explain what Gift the Concert is, what the concept is, and what you're kind of going for with Gift the Concert.
Yes, so Gift a Concert is an initiative on the lines that I expressed before, that we need to think about the future and the immediate future. So this is something that our record label, the record label that my wife Shubha Mughal and I established way back in 2003, called Underscore Records.
Right.
So this is an initiative that we have taken up, and the idea behind it is to have customized concerts
Mhm.
for artists who register for this gift a concert series.
Right. Right.
And customize it in a way that you have a fixed duration,
Hmm.
whether it's a 15-20 minute slot, or whether it's a 30 to 45 minute, or whether it's 60 to 75 minutes. The artist decides the repertoire, the
Right.
artist decides um, the fees that they want to charge,
Oh
and
wow.
that
Okay.
then is communicated to the potential host. And
Wow.
in this case, it's for an exclusive audience. So there'll be just 10 windows basically. So
Right. Okay.
yeah, so you can then gift. The idea is that like we gift people different things on their birthdays and anniversaries or whatever, or just for the fun of gifting something,
Mm.
why not gift music? And so that's the idea behind it. And alongside this, we are also planning to do on a periodic basis um, ticketed public concerts.
Wonderful. Right.
So once again, for artists who are registering with us.
Mm. Hmm.
And so basically, that's the idea, to provide sustained livelihood
Mm.
for musicians and dancers in
That's a
these
wonderful
trying
initiative.
circumstances, and
Mm.
not as a charitable kind of thing, many people like to think that, okay, let's give them a little bit of money, so let them, they also need to live, kind of.
Mm.
So we don't want any of that. It's a
Right.
respectable living that
Right.
we're all leading, and we need to be paid a professional fee for that.
I think that's absolutely fantastic, the initiative that you have taken, because as a dancer of this generation, during this lockdown, I've been, speaking to a lot of musicians and dancers, and a lot of them are in a situation that's very difficult, because they need money to survive,
Yes,
but they also need a platform to survive,
absolutely,
because
absolutely.
this is their love, this is their passion, as well as their livelihood.
Yes.
And so my question to you is, where is the balance between also having a platform, a good platform where you'll go and perform and you'll have a good audience online? Because I think we're going to be online for quite some time now until we get onto the real
Yes.
stage.
Yes.
And the balance between also getting a respectable amount, because I think a lot of young people, I was telling you this before we started this live, that a lot of young people are feeling that they need to do free concerts because otherwise people will forget their art form. They'll forget
Yes.
about their art form, and they
Yes.
won't be seen on social media and on,
Mm.
on, on any platforms for a very, very long time.
Yes.
And so a lot of young artists keep doing free concerts online. And I know this free concert online thing has suddenly become a very big thing, even though free
Yes.
concerts were happening even before
Yes.
coronavirus and COVID
Yes.
19
Yes.
happened. And so I just wanted to know from you, uh, what do you think the balance is? How, as a young person like myself, how do I balance between getting a respectable amount being, given to me for the art that I'm presenting, and also being able to present my art form on platforms across social media?
I think I think that's a choice that every individual has to make. There's no formula for it, and it would be wrong on my part to tell musicians or dancers, don't do any free concerts. I
Right.
mean, am I able to give them something else in lieu of that? No, I'm not.
Mm.
It's a choice that every individual has to make. But these are judicious decisions that needed to be taken even in pre-COVID times. And
Wow.
even in those times, many of us did free concerts. I mean, I'm not talking about let's say, the birth anniversary or death anniversary of a great musician, and where you do it as a tribute. But even otherwise, Several musicians, particularly younger ones, had to do either free concerts or then at very small sums. And even senior musicians, except for very established musicians
Right.
and dancers, most people, I mean, unfortunately, listeners, even the diehard fans of Hindustani music or Indian classical music and dance, don't really know what it is to be a professional performer,
Right.
a musician or a dancer. I mean, what does it mean in real terms when it comes to the financial arrangement
Right. Right.
between a presenter, organizer, and the musician?
Mm.
What are the monies involved? I mean, it's not always that you have corporate sponsorship. uh, I mean, they may be corporate sponsorship for big festivals,
Mm.
but for the small music circles,
Mm.
which work out of, let's say, suburbs, in various cities and towns,
Mm.
and they have a great role to play.
Mm.
They've been playing this role, these music clubs and music circles, since the late 19th century and
Right.
early 20th century.
Right.
So, and they've taken this music forward in that sense. But unfortunately, they all primarily are being sustained because of the membership subscriptions.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not enough to
Right.
take them through the entire financial year.
Mm.
So they are equally hard pressed for funds.
Mm.
But uh, I think, once again, coming back to your question about whether or not a person should do and how many concerts, free concerts,
Mm.
this is a choice that even earlier people like me took, uh, made a judicious decision. And I think people will have to do that even for online concerts.
Absolutely. I wanted to speak about pre-COVID times
Yes,
because there's one thing that you mentioned that this was happening pre-COVID.
yes,
It's
yes,
nothing new, right?
yes, yes,
It's just that since COVID, I think people have started to understand how important money is.
right.
And they've started to pay a bit more attention to that side of things, which I think is great. I think that's one of the
Yeah.
positives that has come out. It's made us introspect on our own community, and we're starting to think about what needs to be improved. But I want to ask you about senior musicians and
Yes,
what the senior musicians can do.
yes,
Because I read in one of your interviews at School India, I think it was, and you said that we're very hypocritical as
yes,
musicians.
yes,
We talk about, we glorify our music and we say it's so, it's so this, it's so that, people should listen to this music, it's classical music, it's this and that. But then we don't buy tickets for
yes,
fellow musicians.
yes,
And we have this whole misconception of going and watching somebody for free in real life. And
absolutely.
then you speak about senior musicians not taking that step. And I just want you to speak about that a little bit in length and what you mean by that. And how can we as a community, if we really have, if we can even call it a community, how can we as a community change this little by little? It doesn't really matter whether you're a senior or a junior artist, but what are the kind of principles that we should keep in mind when we are going to watch somebody perform?
I mean, Shubha and I have always believed that as performers, we need to set aside some amount every month for either buying tickets to concerts or buying music, whether it's
Mm.
online or CDs or
Right.
DVDs or whatever,
Mm.
and because you need to think, first of all, you need to listen to each other on a creative plane, uh, and enrich yourselves
Right.
with what your contemporaries are doing, what junior musicians are doing, what your seniors are doing, everything, So literally, you have to have your ear to the ground, and that can happen only if you listen. And what better way to listen than to pay to listen? I mean, of course, there's YouTube and all these social media platforms, but why not support each other
Mm.
by actually paying for that?
Right.
And similarly for ticketed concerts too. And that's one of the reasons why we are trying this out with the ticketed public concerts that we are doing with under the Gift Concert series. We just did Gift Mallar,
Right.
where
Yes.
Arnab Chakravarti and Sarut Player and vocalist Shashwati Mandal performed,
Mm.
and we got a fairly good response, and so hopefully we'll be able to do more of those, and I really urge fellow musicians and dancers to really be a part of this movement, if I might call it, that and also for senior musicians to who are the celebrated musicians,
Right.
they need to come forward in today's times and say that and urge people, that look, here's a young musician, you have to listen to him, and or her, and buy tickets for that concert. I mean, that would be such a great service to the tradition.
If I can ask you, because I know you've researched a lot about the history of our
Yes.
music. In the last 40 years or so, what are the major differences that you've seen in people going and watching each other perform and the money side of things that's been involved? Do you think we're better off when it comes to going and listening to people buying tickets, or do you think it's gotten worse? And if it has, then why is that the case?
Well, over the past few decades, we have had bigger festivals of music and dance. Because of the increasing size, the audiences have also seemingly increased.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Now, of course, this is not happening across the country. It's happening in major cities. And so, yes, to an extent, the paying public has increased, but at the same time, uh, you know, uh, we can't actually do these performances just on the basis of those tickets.
Right.
We still need extra support and major support, and which is why we need that corporate support or government support or whatever else, so which means that while we have an increasing listenership, uh, that not everybody is paying, and b, that even if they are, it's not enough. So
If I
we
can
need,
just,
sorry.
yeah. No. I just to interrupt you. I wanted to talk about, because when you talk about corporate support,
Yes.
this is very important to, if you can just explain, a lot of the times, a lot of people feel that once you get corporate support from a businessman or some
Yeah.
company,
Yeah.
that they start to rule the kind of curation of that, or the selection of artists that
Artists.
happens
Yes.
also
Yeah.
under that.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that's when things can get a bit icky, because you're
Yeah,
getting
absolutely,
musicians
absolutely, yes.
because of personal relationships, and
Yes.
not really on the basis of the merit of that person's
Oh,
art form.
absolutely, absolutely.
So, what's the system that we can put in place for that? Because of course you need corporate support, but you also need good level of music happening that you're
See,
spreading to the audiences.
Saberi, I think the problem lies in the fact that with corporate sponsorship, we came up with this new entity called the event manager.
Right.
And the event manager, sure, they have a role to play in terms of liaising between the performers and the funding agency or whatever, or liaising between the performer and the audience, and generally getting things done, working behind the scenes. But when the event manager or the event management company started dreaming of himself or itself as a curator and a conceptualizer, that's when we started seeing this downward trend.
Right. Right.
Because, I mean, you don't really need great intelligence to say that so and so celebrated sarod player, so and so celebrated santoor player or tabla player has to be featured. I mean, those names everybody knows. So are you just going to shuffle those names and feature them again and again?
Just keep rotating
So,
them, yeah.
yeah. So unless you get those musicians to do something different, for that you need to know their repertoire, you need to know what their talim was like, what their musical ideas are, and then reinterpret that for the audience. And unfortunately, uh, in most cases, event managers are not capable of doing that. They are not equipped to do that because they are not musically literate. So instead, they should actually engage the services of a professional curator who would come from this discipline. So if you have a dance festival, you have a dancer, and of course have a dancer who will not have any ulterior motives as well.
Ulterior motives,
Uh,
right.
like featuring his or her family members or disciples as against others. So or featuring himself or herself. Those should be ground rules, that if you are attached to a particular, for instance, I mean, it's no great shakes what we were doing, but this is a principle that Shubha and I have always followed. Anything that we curate, we will not perform. So we did, for instance, for 4 years we did a festival called Baja Gaja
Yes.
in Pune. We never performed. Now there were sponsors who wanted us to perform, and they would have paid as well.
Right, right.
But we called the shots. We said
But that
no.
was your principle of not.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, so I think somewhere along the line, all the stakeholders need to dialogue with each other when it comes to all these problems, that are pervading the ecosystem. I think there is a total lack of dialogue. Everybody,
Yes.
everybody leads an isolated existence,
Yes.
and everybody thinks that they are doing the world a favor by saving this great heritage,
Yeah.
and
Very true.
and they are really God sent, So
This takes me to wonderfully takes me to my next point, because you just spoke about everybody being very isolated in their thoughts and whatever they're doing, and I want to talk about, well, I'll start with the musicians here. I think those, again, in the same interview I was reading of yours,
Yes.
you said that musicians, obviously they're very good at the art form, but they don't know a lot about all other things that are related to the music. For
Yes.
example, when they go and perform somewhere, they don't know a lot about the sound.
Yes.
Right? They don't pay a
Yes.
lot of attention to that. How is the sound? How is my performance sounding? How is it looking on camera? If I'm going to put this up on YouTube, what is the quality like?
Yes.
And a lot of organizers also don't know that. They don't pay a lot of attention to that.
Yes.
And this brings me to my question. I had the very this amazing privilege of having TM Krishna on my show.
Yes.
And I asked him the same question, that as musicians, when we go and learn from a guru, of course we're going to learn the art form, the discipline of tabla or kathak or Hindustani vocal sarod sitar. But isn't it time that, especially in my generation now, because there's so much social media and so much more competition online, to understand also the other aspects of being a musician, which is not to do with music directly, but which will make me a better musician or an artist, like the knowledge of sound, knowledge of having a good camera, a good setup, which I must confess, even until recently, I wasn't even thinking about. Because of this lockdown, I've suddenly had to start thinking about, if I'm going to put something up on Facebook, it has to be really good quality.
Yes.
Otherwise, why would somebody watch it or listen to it?
Yes.
So if you want to just speak a little bit about that, because I know you spoke about it in the interview, does this have to kind of start from the classroom? Does this kind of taalim, even if we can call it, of paying more attention to also our image and how we can build as artists and not just musicians, need to start from the classroom?
Well, before I go into that in greater detail, on a more broader, broader sense, I would say that gurus as well as institutions need to periodically review their pedagogic method. Uh, and it's all very well to say that this has been passed down generations and it will continue like this. No, it has never happened like that. Every person has done something different, uh, and it's time that we realize that this has not been an unchanging tradition.
Right.
uh, there have always been individual interpretations to the content itself, to the manner of presenting the art on stage. And so it's better that we address this out there instead of hiding behind these false facades.
Right.
So, having said that, now that we are faced with all these issues of sound and video, etc., etc., I would equally say that it's not possible for, let's say, gurus to necessarily negotiate this path, because they may not be adequately capable of doing that
Right. Right.
for their personal choices. But what they could do is that they could invite, let's say, an audio engineer or a good videographer or something like that, to a special workshop that they do
Right.
for their students, and
Wonderful
and
idea.
and and they get their students to pay that person for that
Right.
workshop.
Right.
So at least some basic knowledge you get. And similarly, and of course, institutions definitely must have this in their curricula, and not just as a perfunctory kind of thing. Oh, sound production, thoda sa ye bhi kar lenge. So it has to be very well thought out.
Proper. Well, yeah.
Yes, and for that you need to engage with sound engineers to actually decide what that syllabus is going to be,
Right.
because the people who are designing the syllabi may not be capable of putting down this material. So the broader canvas has to be thought out. In our case, we try to work with an audio engineer who travels with us as much as we can make that happen.
Wow.
And so we don't really need to look at that. He's the master of his discipline,
Right.
and so we go with that. He knows what we want. We know what he wants.
Again, it comes down to dialogue, right? It comes down to
Absolutely.
having a dialogue with somebody else who's, who's not a musician, but they're helping you become an artist on stage.
Oh, absolutely.
I
And they
think
are
that's
artists in their own right.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of organizers, and this is not just the ones who are not well funded, people who are also well funded, they say, why do you need an audio engineer? I mean, music making is all about sound. So, if the sound is not good, how are you going to make the music reach, and
Absolutely.
communicate? So, but these are areas that people need to understand. They think that, okay, we've got the vendor to get the equipment, so the vendor will handle all the sound. So, there are some vendors who may be educated in this field, or who may have educated themselves over the years. But there are people who are specialists in this area, and you need to recognize that. And the sooner we get them on board, the better it will be for this discipline.
Absolutely. I mean, these are such important points because I think, again, this is one of the reasons I started Cut the Crap, because I felt like there was a really big lack of dialogue, like you were saying.
Yes.
We musicians and artists, we're very, very just in our own worlds.
Yes.
And we don't really open our minds and our hearts to other art forms as much. And we
Yes.
feel that Indian classical music and dance is the be all and the end all of it.
We don't even speak to each other.
We don't speak to each other.
The musicians don't speak to each other. Dancers, I don't know. whether they do
No,
too.
we don't speak to anyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
We don't.
and so,
I mean, dancers don't go and watch music. Musicians don't go and
correct.
watch dance.
Yes, yes,
I mean, that's a whole different issue in itself,
yes, yes,
which I've
yes.
spoken about in length. I
Yeah,
think my
yeah.
viewers are quite bored of that.
So
But I
you know the definition of Sangeet, that all the three together, Geeta, Madhyam, and Nritya and all that. That is all for our texts, but
yeah,
we don't
yeah,
actually practice that,
we don't practice it.
unfortunately.
We've got a question from Kunal Roy. He's saying,
Yes,
lovely conversation. Question for Aneesh ji.
thank you,
There's
Kunal.
such little writing about the performing arts by performing artists. What could be done to encourage artists to write more about their process, intricacies of their performance, and other concerns in the performing arts as you have been discussing? You mentioned several of these in your books too.
Yes, uh, that's a lovely question, and thank you, Kunal, for being there. Um, mm, I think it's very very important for musicians or dancers to write about their work. This is something that Dr. Ashok Ranade, one of the most eminent ethnomusicologists of our country, he would always urge performers to write. He would say that don't bother about style or anything like that. Just be articulate, and then don't complain if some journalist who is not well informed about your work then says something, and then you crib about it. So instead you start writing, and so that's so true. And I think somewhere in our Guru Shishya Parampara, as well as in the institutionalized training, we need to get this going on a regular basis. Just for instance, maybe start with reporting a program that you've watched. Okay, then slowly getting a little analytical about it. Similarly, expressing what you are engaged in, and then slowly but steadily trying to be more critical about your work, uh, and the work of your contemporaries or whoever, fellow
Right,
students,
right.
and not in a malicious way, but in a manner that you can have a free and frank
In a
dialogue.
more constructive manner.
Yes, 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 yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. I mean, I think, thank you for that question, Kunal. It's a wonderful question because this is something that I always think about. Whenever I go on the internet, there's very few things written by artists themselves. I mean, I know you've written a few books, and that's wonderful, but there's not many artists who do that and speak about their experiences. And talking about experiences, this is my next question. Obviously, as artists, every single artist goes through their own struggle. That may be a financial struggle, that may be maybe somebody is very well off financially, but they're not getting the platform that they want, and also a struggle internally as an artist. uh, I see a weird imbalance in the kind of generation that I'm in, of musicians who don't really know whether they can be themselves completely on stage while they're performing. And I'll explain what I mean by this. uh, so I did an interview with it was on Cut the Crap. I've forgotten who they were, but two young musicians, and one of them was saying, I think it was Yadnesh Riker, the very
Yes,
talented young
yes.
violinist, and we were having a very fun conversation, and he was saying that I feel like I have to wear a kurta all the time to seem like a serious musician, because if I don't, then people don't take me as a serious musician. And this really interested me because I think that's something very little. It sounds like it's a very little thing, but this really raises a lot of questions in the mind of young musicians, because they feel that I have to, be this very polished and this, I don't know, maybe sometimes even pretentious if they're not that. They have to be that to be in the good books of an artist or an organizer or to be taken seriously. And if you're young, that's even more the case because you want them to take your music seriously and not judge you by your age. What kind of advice would you give to young musicians who are facing this kind of thing? Because I think this is something that's a lot bigger than people think it to be. and it's changed a lot of musicians as they grow up in their careers.
Yeah. So first and foremost, you prefaced this question by saying that talking a little bit about the problems that performers face,
Yes.
both the on a creative level as well as the professional level. And while that is very true of our day and age, uh, it is even more so uh, of the generations which have preceded us.
For
I
us,
mean,
yeah.
let's say 100 years ago in the city that I'm living, Mumbai, which was then called Bombay, musicians were coming from across North India and Central India and even from, let's say, Goa. And they settled here, made this their permanent home. And can you imagine the lack of transport and communication at that point? I mean, they started coming way back, like around mid 19th century, and that's when the railways had just about started,
Right.
and then making this their home, having patrons who are largely uninitiated listeners, as against princely patrons who were kind of educated or
Right.
musically
Right.
literate or literate in the arts. So, I mean, both in terms of living as well as working terms, they had to battle it out to a large extent, you know. Once we you know, study this history, this background, then we feel more grounded, and we feel okay. So we are definitely better off, and also if we are share an empathy for each other, then we realize no, all of us are facing this problem, and so together we can perhaps come up with some answers, but we need to talk to each other.
Absolutely.
So now coming to the actual question, I feel that there's no quick and one answer, you know, to that question. I feel that as a musician, I believe that the music that I make uh, has to be natural, you know. I should not have to put on anything uh, to make music. And if that is the case with making music, then the same is it for the rest of my personality. Because what is music? Music is a reflection of my personality.
Right.
So if I'm natural in jeans and t-shirt, fine, you know. I mean, I personally, if you ask me, I'm more comfortable in kurta churidar, you know.
Right.
So most of my time, waking hours, I'm in that
Right.
set of
Yeah.
clothes, you know. But others, if they aren't, but conversely, I don't think it's a wise idea just to make things trendy, or
Absolutely.
or to have some kind of novelty value to your playing. You dress up differently,
Right.
you know. It's very superficial, I feel, you know. You If you concentrate enough on your work, the rest will follow. This is what I feel. But this is not in the nature of a message. This is from personal experience. I am no one to give messages.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. That's so wonderful. I mean, I was asking more from a point of view of maybe it's not affecting your music, but it maybe does affect the way that you interact with people. Because I mean, I've faced this. I've said this on the show many times, especially being a woman in this field. Um, if I've gone to a gig wearing jeans and t-shirt, and not because I think it's trendy too, but just because I'm comfortable in it, you know, I will be kind of be like, oh, you're a dancer, really? For some reason, people cannot connect with me wearing jeans and t-shirt and also being a Kathak dancer, and that to me is a bit like, why not? You know, I'm not gonna be
Yeah.
wearing my ghagra the whole day because you think that I'm a Kathak dancer. And these kind of things in a very, very weird way. And I think that in India, these conversations don't happen much. In a very weird way, these things affect the mentality of a lot of young musicians and dancers.
To that, I have a very simple answer, and this is something that I learned very early in my
Yes.
life from my parents. Uh, and they clearly told me, and my siblings too, just do what you want to. Do,
Yeah,
if you're going to do things to make other people happy, nobody is going to always be happy with what you're doing.
exactly.
So best is you do what you're happy with, and the rest will flow. It doesn't matter.
Mm,
So if you're happy going in a t-shirt and jeans to a concert, it's fine. I mean, you don't have to please anybody.
mm, yeah. We've got another question from Mohanish Jaju. He says, very insightful conversation. Do you think ethnomusicology should be introduced in formal music curriculum in BA or MA music colleges or universities? In my view, the discipline itself is so interdisciplinary that it might really help nurture various perspectives in the practicing musician or dancer.
Oh, absolutely. I think we should have done it long back. Uh, Unfortunately, in India, we don't have too many people who have studied the subject
Mm,
in great depth.
mm,
So, which is why we don't have that as part of the curricula
mm,
in most universities.
mm.
But we need to do that post haste.
Mm, mm. And how do you think, I mean, what do you think is the best way to try and do that? Try and spread more of this culture of dialogue and really researching into music. Because even myself, I haven't done a lot of research into the history of the music, which
Yes.
I think it's not really put into us from when we start learning music.
Yes.
It's only about the practical of learning the music rather than actually going back to the history of it.
Yes, that's a little unfortunate that our, like I said, the pedagogy needs to be reviewed,
Mm,
and whether it's the Guru Shishya Parampara or the institutions,
mm,
we need to give importance to research activity, and uh, and you need not be capable of producing reams of paper.
mm,
But uh, this is one more avenue whereby you can engage with your art form at a
mm,
deeper level.
mm, mm, mm,
Finally, what is it that you're theorizing about,
mm, mm.
or what is it that you're seeing in a larger cultural context? It's the performance.
Right,
It's the performance practice. So
right.
you are already engaged in that, the performance practice. You know it better than most other people, your
Mm, mm,
performance practice.
right.
So now, if you just add to that the theoretical aspect, which is to articulate about it and critically analyze its present, its past, and what's the way forward, and see it in a particular cultural context. I mean, all the questions that you have asked me today
Mm,
about these art forms, whether it's music or dance, is to do with the particular context that they are being performed in.
correct. Right.
Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, this is all part of ethnomusicology.
Mm, mm.
It's just that it's a name that we are not familiar with.
We're not familiar with.
Yeah.
Right.
But if
I
we
did.
have this organized study,
Yeah.
it will be wonderful, an enriching experience for all of us.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you, Mohanish, for asking that very, very good question because I think
Yes,
this is something that needs to be spoken about.
absolutely.
And just from this, I remembered something. I was watching an interview yesterday. I don't want to take the name of what I was watching and who I was
So then
watching,
there's
but
no fun.
it was a. I mean, I could,
You
I
said
could, but
your
I'll
show
tell
is
you.
called Cut the
I mean,
Crap.
I
Not
could,
fair, not fair.
I could, but you know, the reason I won't is because I would rather do it face to face with that person when that person comes on my show.
All right.
So, I want to do that, but this, yesterday there was an interview going on, and it, it really upset me, for one reason and one reason only. The musician that was speaking, he was a very wonderful musician of our generation. but he could not. He's not a person, and there are people like that who are not very confident in speaking in public, you know. And he was being patronized. The interviewer was being very patronizing towards him, basically, kind of asking him questions that obviously he couldn't understand as much, but she was not ready to explain to him that this is what I'm asking you.
Is it because of the language?
It was partly because of the language, and also there were comments like kind of like you are still stuck in that day and age of following this sitar player, and you know you haven't really gone out of that. And then she would ask him a question, he would answer, you know, very sincerely from his own heart and what he feels. And she would say, but you know, I don't understand the point of you going to this many gurus or this many people. Why would you do that? And she was just questioning him and being very patronizing, and he was being put into a very, very uncomfortable situation. And that really put into my mind that if only we were taught from when we start our musical journey that we also need to have a good sense of having a dialogue with people, then this intimidation, like you're a very senior musician, I'm a young musician, but if I'm continuously intimidated by you, I'm unable to have a conversation with you. I'm unable to ask you the questions I want to ask. And why should I feel that way? And why should I feel that because you are interviewing me, that you're giving me a massive opportunity, and you know whatever Dr. Aneesh Pradhan is telling me is the and the be all and end all of this
Yes.
conversation. And
Absolutely.
unfortunately a lot of young musicians feel that way.
Mm.
And you know, I was watching that and I felt bad, and at the same time I felt that this is something that really needs to be addressed. Because if you don't have dialogue, you will forever be intimidated by all your seniors, forever. And this will go on until you're 50 years old. Even then you'll be like, these are my seniors, I'll never say this in my life. You know, this kind of behavior is something that I see, and it doesn't just affect the person, it affects their music, it affects how they speak to people. And this is not their fault, because this is what they're seeing their previous generations also doing. And I wanted to tell you, have you experienced this? And we actually have a question, so I'm going to tie it in with this. Abhishek Borkar asks, as this seems to be
Hi,
a trending
Abhishek.
topic, as this seems to be a trending topic these days, were you ever the victim of nepotism or gangism when you were younger? What advice would you give to young musicians trying to make a name for themselves, stand for their principles without having to become the yes men or Sarwar?
Okay, so I'll address this is a slightly different question, so I will answer that. But before that, I'll answer your question.
Yes.
So I understand what you're saying, and if I was to extend that argument further, there are a lot of musicians and dancers who are put in a situation where they have to conduct lecture demonstrations or workshops, and not all of them are capable of doing that. You know, it's a different story when you have to teach a composition to somebody, but when you have to explain concepts, define terms, explain processes, then it's not always possible for everyone to do that. And I think that is a weakness or an inadequacy, once again, in the way we are training our students. We tell them to learn things by rote, and this is not only in music or dance, it's all over. We don't encourage analytical skills,
Right.
and whereas you know, what is music making or dancing, it's all about communication skills. You're expressing your innermost emotions and trying to communicate those with your audiences. So you are actually in a field which is based on communication skills, and then but on the other hand, you are not taught to analyze things. You learn you are supposed to have implicit faith in whatever you have learned.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have this kind of fantasized idea of what this tradition is all about, you know, that for 5,000 years it has been like this, you know. And you just have to pick up a recording from the past 50 years or so, and you'll know that the music has changed vastly. So I think it's time that gurus and institutions relook at the way they are training students. And maybe it's a tall order, but I don't think so, because in our own way we are trying to do that with our students.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I don't think it's difficult.
I mean, it starts in the smallest places. I mean, whatever we can do individually to make this happen, I think.
Absolutely,
right? I mean,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yes.
And if you would just like to answer Abhishek.
Abhishek's question. So you know this idea of nepotism, favoritism. These things have existed in the past as well. Both the talk about it and the fact that in some places it has also played out. Whether I faced it or no, I never really, to be very frank, I never really thought about it. Now you might say that, you know, I'm trying to be this holier than thou, but no. When I started learning music, I started at the age of 6. I didn't know what performance was about at that time, and when I knew what performance was about, which is 8 or 9, I was already so much in love with the art form that I didn't really care. When am I going to get the next concert opportunity? Maybe it was a different generation. Maybe it was a different day and age, but I don't think so. There was enough competition at that time. There was enough competition 100 years ago also, as history tells us. So it's just the way you want to react to all these things around you. You can sit and really weep over all these things, or then be positive and concentrate on your work and just go ahead and do your work. I know it sounds easier said than done, but once again, even in this case, you need to dialogue. You know, if you really have evidence of somebody indulging in nepotism, favoritism, call them out.
Right.
If you don't have the guts to call them out, if you're going to relish in this all this
Just the
information
complaining of it.
at the level of gossip, then it's not worth it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the important point here. That again, it all comes back to the same thing about dialogue, having dialogue and being able to speak to people about what's happening and just having a civil conversation. I think I used to say this from season 1. The reason I do this show is to have a conversation.
Yes.
Because there's so many people who ask questions on this show that they wouldn't usually ask if they met you in person or if they met me in person. And
I mean, a simple example I'll give you. Supposing you've gone for a concert somewhere, and you have had to encounter great hardships while traveling, while performing there, etc., etc., and for reasons best known to the organizer. Will you then put pen to paper, or would you put it out there on social media saying that I did this program and I had to encounter a great deal of obstacles? Anybody else wishing to do a program with this organizer, be on your guard.
Right. Yeah.
How many musicians will do that?
Almost none.
Yeah. So if you have got hard facts, then you need to say it out there. If you don't have hard facts, then it's just gossip.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And I promise that the example that I gave you about that young artist, I'm going to bring that up with the person who I saw do that. I will do it, and that's on my mind. It's been on my mind since yesterday because it's something that as a young person I wouldn't like to face in that kind of situation. There was one comment I was just wanting to read out. Satish Vyasji says, "Good to see you, Saberi, with one of my
Ji,
most
namaste.
favorite musician come humble human beings." So he's watching.
Thank
Um,
you.
and Kunal Roy is asking another question, but we've taken a question from Kunal, so I'm just
Yes.
gonna take another question. Is this a question? Yes, it is. Arnab Chakrabarti is asking.
Oh, hi Arnav.
Tabla accompaniment has changed radically since you first. Okay, this is great. We're going into a different avenue. This is great. Has changed radically since you first started your career. In many, if not most situations today, we find that the tabla artist feels the need to assert their presence in the music, even if it is at times by force. You, on the other hand, have crafted a distinct identity due to your ability to blend in and lend your personality to the music, but in a most unobtrusive manner, generating ideas that complement the music and while still remaining one of the most relevant tabla accompanists of this age. What is your secret sauce? He asks.
Thank you. That's very generous of Arnab. Uh, mm, I think it comes from, first of all, the talim that you have received. And if your talim is good, your guru has taught you to be a good listener. And your general upbringing, so the upbringing that I had at my home, we were taught to be good listeners first,
Right.
before performers. So that's the essential asset for any performer. Once you're a good listener, you can enter into any dialogue, and you don't need to feel threatened in any which way. There's that. Uh, I think it's a Confucian saying. We often confuse humility with timidity, and civility with servility. So you can be humble and yet not be timid.
Right.
So both are quite different, and I think I've tried to do that, and I really didn't have to try to do that. It's just my personality. If I think something is not going right, I will say it. If I'm happy with the thing, then I go with that flow. So it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
I don't need to be assertive in that sense, or impose my identity. My identity should come through the music, and that music that I'm making. If I'm accompanying you or Arnab, you are the main artist, and you are setting the mood of that performance. So I need to be a good listener and enter into that conversation with you. And once I do that adequately, you also will hopefully respond in the same manner.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, it's wonderful. And thank you so much, Arnav, for asking that question. I just want to take this a little bit further, on the topic of tabla.
Yes.
When you perform in India and when you perform abroad,
Yes.
what are the kind of things that change in your repertoire, whether it's as a solo artist or as an accompanist? What are the kind of things, or does it change? Do you keep the audience in mind and do you say these are, this is a Western audience and they won't understand much? Do I need to change? What are the kind of things that go through your mind when you're on stage in India versus when you're on stage abroad?
No change. Absolutely no change. The only change would be perhaps if there's a time constraint.
Right.
Then you'd have to tailor your performance differently. Choose the repertoire accordingly. But otherwise, literally, I don't see any difference.
And why do you think, why do you feel that it's not necessary to change your repertoire? Because there's a lot of people who give this argument that, we're in a different country and they don't really understand the classical nuances of our music. So what if they get bored and so I should change my repertoire to do something else? Why do you feel that it's not necessary?
I think the worst thing for a performer is to underestimate his or her audience. Even in India, there's a cross section of listeners. Not everybody is musically literate at the same level. So, but that doesn't mean that I need to compromise things or dilute things. So, and if I'm doing that, if I'm making that change, then I should actually say it.
I should be open about it.
Yes, I should be open about it and say that, look, this is what I'm doing. and I'm doing it because of these reasons, then I should have the strength to say that.
Yeah, and again, it comes back to dialogue again. Have a dialogue about it. Speak about
Yes,
it and be open about it. And I think this is what I was telling you before about labeling. This is something that really bothers me when I see somebody performing something that's maybe not what they're calling it. Instead of
yes,
instead of that, if you just call a spade and make it clear,
absolutely,
it's much
absolutely.
better that way.
Yeah.
You're being honest to yourself
I
and you're
saw your program on dance, and all of you were talking about Bollywood Kathak or
yes,
something.
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
that,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And that's exactly what all the senior dancers were saying, is that we don't
Yes,
have a problem with Bollywood and the
yes,
dance that happens. It's just that we'd much rather that these people say that, yes, I'm doing this on this Bollywood song. This is not Kathak. This is
yes,
inspired by it, but this
yes,
is not Kathak in any sense. And be
yes.
open about it and be, very,
Absolutely,
very just
absolutely.
honest about it.
Yes.
Um, I want to just get on to the last question that I want
Sure.
to ask. This is again to do with tabla players, accompanists, not just tabla players, any accompanists, about publicity, posters, and how, as an organizer or a musician, if you're organizing a concert, do you keep the respect of both the main artist and the accompanying artist? Because this is something, again, I've done this, I had this conversation in length with all the organizers that I've had on my show. And I haven't had it with a musician, so I wanted to ask you. I had this conversation with Shashi Vyas ji, Sandeep Virdi ji,
Yes.
Devi
Yes.
Natak ji. I've had it with them
Mm.
on why do in some posters, why is there no name of tabla player? It still happens. We're in 2020, and I don't see any reason for not having their names. In fact, I also don't see any reason for not having their photos. What do you have to say about that? Because I know you were saying you have been fighting this for a while. And if you
I'll
just
tell
want
you
to...
a funny thing. That once when it happened, and my wife Shubha, she always puts it in her contract that publicity material should always have these two or three names, whatever. And even after that, some organizers fall short of what they are expected to do. And short of taking them to the court, I mean, what are you going to do? So,
Yeah.
so one day she just joked and she told us, Sudhir Nayak, our harmonium accompanist colleague, and me, that I'm going to start, and both of you don't start playing. Just sit there. Don't do anything.
Yeah.
Just sit there. Let us see what happens.
Yeah.
So, but that's a joke, because finally, once you're on stage, you have to respect the performance space that you are in,
Right.
and respect the audience, because they don't know what has happened behind the scenes. But coming to your question, I think it's basic etiquette. I mean, if we are in a conversation, let's say 4 or 5 people, if we are going to have a conversation, we need to introduce each other.
Of course.
If we don't do that, it just means that you lack basic etiquette, and that then tells upon the kind of upbringing you have had from your gurus or your parents or whoever else, your teachers. As simple as that. If you have had a good upbringing, then you will jolly well make sure that you give all names. We used to, in the same festival that I told you about, Baja Gaja, we used to feature close to 150 or even 200 artists. We used to make sure the names are given as per what the groups wanted themselves to be called.
Right. Yeah. And my
So,
extended question to you for this is because I have been and it's fine. I think criticisms are something to take. But I've been criticized on this because I've asked it so many times on this show that some people are just like, why are you even talking about it again? Which to me is even more worrying, that people ask me, why are you talking about it? But they've said to me that, why are we also have to keep in mind the aesthetics of the poster. If there are 10 names on one poster, the aesthetical look of the poster is compromised. And I'm thinking to myself, is there not a way to balance that? Like, now you have electronic media. You don't
yes.
even need to print out posters with 10 names or 10 photos. You could make, for all you know, you could make 5 different posters with two photos and names.
Yeah,
And people
finally,
are not...
if there is a will, there's a way. As simple as that. And in most cases, a designer can do all these things once you
Yeah.
explain to them what is required. But in many a case, there's no professional designer hired, so it's all an in-house operation, the families of the organizers or somebody, some student is doing that, so they don't have the wherewithal to even comprehend, leave alone actually do it. So
Yeah.
it just upsets a whole lot of us when even in 2020 we need to deal with these basic courtesies.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, this is you're talking about names on posters. What about other things? For donkey's years, we used to live in a separate hotel, and the main artist used to live in another hotel.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
and
used
it
to
still
travel by
happens.
a different mode of transport, like by rail, and the main artist used to go by plane.
This still
and
happens. Yeah.
and even in I mean, so you mind taking names, but I will take a name. So I so even for Spick Mackey concerts, where all of us are actually were doing it for a cause,
Mm,
okay, supposedly for creating awareness about this great tradition of
right.
ours, okay, we were put in different places,
Mm.
we were traveling in different. It's only later on that I managed to,
Have a dialogue with them, and
assert.
yeah.
There I was assertive.
Right. Yeah. I mean, where you have to
Yes.
be, you have to be. And I
Yes.
just like to say, I will also take a name because now that you've opened up this. But when I had the conversation with Shashi Vyasji on my
Yes.
show, I was telling him about his posters, and I wasn't trying to do it in an aggressive way. It was genuine questions that I had as a young artist. Because for me, it's beyond my understanding why you would have, for example, the name of the guru of the vocalist, but not the name of the tabla player on a
Yes.
poster. For
Yes.
me, that blew my mind. And it's
Yes.
not just about them; it's about multiple organizations that
Yes.
do this. And so, and he just said that I'm not involved in the designing of this. And to me, that doesn't really make a lot of sense because
Yeah.
we here also, my father Pandit Rajkumar ji and my mother Srimati Chandrima Misra, we as a family organize concerts here.
Yes.
And last year we brought 11 artists from India. It was a Kathak festival in the name of my grandfather, and we had to include 12 names on a poster. And we realized that we can't do it on one poster. It's all going to go out electronically. So we made 4 different posters and we put them up one by one. But everybody's name was included, everybody's photo was included. There was no size discrimination. There was no size discrimination between a main artist, because I'm a main artist, I'm the dancer, and between the tabla player who's playing with me. And why should there be? There's so many different ways of doing it. I just don't really see the excuse that one can provide
Yeah.
in 2020, and for the coming future, to kind of say that मेरे को नहीं डालने का है tabla player's name or
See, because being innovative is a qualification only for the performers, not for the organizers. If they were innovative, they would have thought of a way out of, giving due acknowledgement to
yeah,
everybody concerned.
absolutely.
Yeah, as I said, if there's a will, you will find every which way.
Absolutely. I hope that a lot of people are listening to this, because I think this has been such a wonderful conversation. I just like to say that
Thank you.
lots of people are saying, Satish Vyasri is again saying Aneesh is a role model for younger musicians. And there's wonderful comments coming in. Shashwati Mandalji is saying, very insightful conversation. Thank you, Saberi, and thank you, Anishi. Thank you for joining. To everybody who's been listening, there's
Thank
just
you very
one
much.
last question,
Yes.
and then I would like you to end with any composition that is your favorite or something that you would want to share with us. There's
Okay.
one question by Shiv Shankar Sarkarji, who says,
Yes.
what is your view about the quality of tabla? Wow, this is a very big question. What is your view about the quality of tabla players of 1950s, 60s, 70s, and today? So maybe go into that and maybe explain the difference. I don't know. It's a very open-ended question.
I mean, first of all, it's difficult to see everything as a monolith. Tabla players of the 50s. I mean, not all tabla players sounded the same, even in
Mm,
the 50s.
mm.
So,
Maybe the question, maybe I'll ask you something specific.
yes.
What do you think is the major difference between tabla players even 20 years ago to the young tabla players who are playing now? What do you think is the major difference? And uh, what do you think they're lacking, and what do you think they're doing better than generations before them?
Uh, I think earlier uh, there were more well-defined styles, and
Okay.
when I
Yeah.
mean styles, I'm not only referring to gharanas,
Mm,
which play out more in solo repertoire,
mm,
uh, but even in accompanying styles.
mm, mm.
Uh, Today, unfortunately, the accompaniment is very often uh, standardized or
Mm.
homogenized, and there are probably a variety of reasons for this. And one of the major reasons, I think, is that we have got iconic figures, like, let's say, Ustad Zakir Hussain, you
Mm,
know.
mm, mm, mm.
Now, but what makes him an icon? It's
Right.
not the publicity that makes him an icon. It's his music that makes him an icon. And
Mm.
and and what is it in his music that makes him an icon? It's his it's the improvisation, the exuberance, the spontaneity that he brings to his tabla, to his accompaniment, to his solo. Now, if we are going to clone that, you know, we are losing the basic essence of his tabla actually.
Right. Right.
So,
Absolutely.
the sooner we realize that, we can't really clone anybody. You have to be yourself. Whether
Mm.
you are in t-shirt or jeans or kurta churidar or with your tabla or dance,
Have to be
you
unique
have to be
to
yourself,
yourself.
and you have to find your inner voice.
Mm.
I mean,
Mm.
this whole journey, it's not really about. I mean, the fact that we are doing concerts and everything, that's of course it's important as a professional, but that's, for me at least, that's not why I'm doing music. Why I'm doing music is to find my own inner voice.
Mm.
So if we are trying to do that kind of search, then automatically we will have a different style.
Yeah. And what would you say is one thing that this generation of tabla players is doing really well, according to you, when you're listening to them? What is that one thing that this generation tabla players are maybe doing better than the previous generations have?
I think they are. I think the present generation, that means um, mine as well as the next one,
Mm.
they're very savvy
Mm.
with all that's going on in the world of music,
Mm.
particularly with the technology part, uh, which the earlier masters probably didn't have.
We're not, or yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
not as aware of or didn't
Yes,
have
yes, yes,
access.
yes. But
Yeah.
today, so whether it's to do with sound technology or whatever else, they are better informed,
Mm.
and so they are mm, able to handle that in a better manner. They
Mm.
are able to also articulate better about what they are involved in. So whether it's a lecture demonstration or workshop, etc., etc., they can explain
Right.
these ideas. I'm not saying that the earlier people couldn't.
Mm. Mm.
They probably were articulating more through their music than
More
through
through
the
their music.
spoken word, and
Right.
and very often we are probably doing it more through the spoken word than our music. But these are differences that we have to live with and
Yeah.
learn from.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, and for being here. But before I let you go, I'd like to also, because I've also learned tabla a little bit
Yes,
from my father, Pandit
fantastic.
Rajkumar Misra ji, and I want to share a little kaida with you. It was a composition of my great grandfather, Pandit Jailal ji, with your permission.
Wow, क्या बात है.
Um, it's in teen tal.
Yes.
Kregena dhati dhagena dhati dhagatna kregena naki dhati dhagena dhati dhagatna kena kregena dhati dhagena dhati dhagatna kregena naki dhati dhagena dhati dhagatna kena kregena dhati dhagena tet dhagena da kregena dhati dhagena dhati dhagatna kena kregena dhati dhagena tet dhagena da kregena dhati dhagena dhati dhagatna kregena dhati dhagena dhati dhagena kregena dhati dhagena dhati dhagatna kena kregena dhati dhagena dhati dhagena kregena dhati dhagena dhati dhagatna
आहा,
it's
क्या
really
बात है.
Beautiful composition, and the use of Kreghena is pretty rare, I think, also.
It's rare. It's rare that a qaida starts with k.
Yeah, yeah. So
So there's one that I have
please,
tried.
yes, yes.
Okay, and again in teen tal. Katagin nagina tarita gitina katagin nagina tina katagin nagina kat dagina tina gina katagin nagina tarita gitina katagin nagina tina katagin nagina kat dagina tina gina
Kya baat.
katagin nagina tarita gitina katagin nagina tina katagin nagina kat dagina tina gina katagin nagina tarita gitina katagin nagina tina katagin nagina kat dagina tina gina katagin nagina katagin nagina and likewise.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. It's been amazing speaking to you, and it's so great to end on a musical note. Thank you for being here. Thank you for agreeing to be here. And somebody's written here, Hari Mohan Sharma ji has written, "Thank you, Anish Bhai. Amazing answers. A lot of people would have been reluctant to speak some things that you talked about today. Thank you very much."
Yeah.
Which is exactly what I hope to create from my show. So I think this has
Thank you.
been
I'm
wonderful.
I'm in lockdown mode, so I don't have to seek asylum elsewhere.
And lots of people, Anjali Malkar, excellent conversation. Thanks, Saberi and Anish ji. Dhananjay Hegre says Anish ji is one of the most articulate and thinking musicians we have today. Lots of people are writing. They're all saying thank you. Thank you so much. Gauri
Thank you,
Pathan is
Saberi.
watching. Thank you very much for
Thank
being
you.
on the show.
All the best with all your other shows and also with your dance and your singing as well. I've heard both. Wonderful. And hope to see you soon in better circumstances.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. And thank you, everybody. And I'll see you in the next episode of Cut the Crap. Thank you.
And my regards to your parents as well.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.